The story for today is all about betrayal. It's about betrayal of a best friend, betrayal of a wife. You name it, you're about to hear it. Oh my gosh. As I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through my daughter's iPad, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were texts from my best friend Brandon, and they were definitely not the kind of text that a man should be sent to another man's wife. I've known Brandon for years. We've met in high school and had been inseparable ever since, to be honest. We'd been through so much together, the good times and the bad, and I'd always considered him to be like a brother to me. So when I saw the text message on the screen, I was in complete and utter shock. I couldn't believe that my wife would do something like this to me, and to my own best friend nonetheless. I was hurt, angry, and just confused. How could she do this to me? How could Brandon, the guy I was just sharing drinks with a couple days ago discussing our lives, betray me like this? I sat there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process everything that was happening. My mind was racing as I tried to make sense of it all. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something to make the pain go away. But I knew that I could not let my wife or Brandon see how much they've hurt me, so I took a deep breath and tried to compose myself. I knew that I needed to think carefully about what to do next. I couldn't just lash out and confront them not without a plan. I decided to take some time to think through things and come up with a strategy. I knew that I couldn't just give up on my marriage without at least trying to fix things. I loved my wife, and I was determined to do whatever it took to win her back and prove to her I was the man she always loved. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was willing to put in the work. I'm just hoping it wasn't too late. As for Brandon, well, I guess we'll see what'll happen next. Hey guys, Mr. Edito here. So this is a very intense story, and let me tell you right now, it's a 6-part story. And if you think things might have ended on a happy note at that end of that part, oh no. You're in for a treat, because things are about to take an absolute turn. I hope you guys are having a great day. Smash that subscribe button. Here is update number 2. Hey. It's been 3 days, I couldn't take it anymore. The pain and betrayal that I was feeling was just too much to bear. I'd spent the last few days trying to come up with a plan to win my wife back, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there's no way I could just forgive and forget. So I made the decision to confront her about it. It was kind of a spur-of-the-action moment. I knew it would not be easy, but I had to know the truth. I had to know why she's done this to me and if there was any chance of salvaging our marriage. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch and scrolling through her phone. She looked up at me as I approached, and a mixture of fear and guilt was written all over her face, as she must have known my eyes. She must have known that I found out. "We need to talk," I said, voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, put her phone down with tears starting to well up in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Joey," she said while her voice was trembling. "I never meant for this to happen. It was just a mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated as my anger started to boil over. "You cheat on me with my best friend and it's just a mistake?" She starts to cry harder, her shoulders shaking as the tears stream down her face. I don't know what happened. It's the only thing she could muster up. I was just feeling so lonely and neglected, and then Brandon was there for me. It was just a moment of weakness, I swear. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream and shout to make her feel as much pain as she's caused me, but the other part of me just felt sorry for her. I could see how much she was hurting, and I didn't want to add to her pain. So I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. "What do you want to do?" I asked while my voice is shaking with emotion. She looked at me and her eyes were red and swollen. "I think it's best if I go stay with my mom for a few days, no?" she said while her voice was barely over a whisper. "I just need some time to think." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I watched as she gathered her stuff and left the house, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my pain. I didn't know what to do. I was angry, hurt, and confused, but most of all, I was sad. I'd lost my best friend, and I'd lost my wife, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to get them back. I sat down on the couch, feeling completely alone and helpless. I'd been so focused on my career and providing for my family that I had neglected my wife, and now it seemed like it was too late to fix things. I buried my head in my hands and let the tears fall. I'd never felt so lost and alone in my life. I just hoped that one day things would get better. Update number 3, 1 week later. Hey guys, it's been a week since my wife left to stay with her mom, and I've been struggling to come to terms with everything that happened. I'd lost my best friend and my wife, and it was a pain that I could not shake. I spent my days working and taking care of the kids, but at night I was left alone with my thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened and how I could have prevented it. But as the days went by, something started to shift inside of me. I realized that I could not keep living in the past, dwelling on the pain and the betrayal. I needed to find a way to move forward and start healing. So I decided to reach out to my wife and see if we could start talking. I knew that it wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to do whatever it took to save the marriage. To my surprise, she agreed to meet with me. We met at a coffee shop, and for the first time in a week, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Joey," she said with her voice shaking. "I never meant to hurt you. I was just feeling so lost and alone, and I made a terrible mistake." I took her hand in mine and gave it a squeeze. I said, "I know." My voice was filled with so much emotion. "But we can't change the past. We can only move forward and make things right." She looked at me with her eyes filled with tears, and she says, "Do you think we can do that?" Her voice was barely even over a whisper. I took a deep breath and smiled, and I said, "I think we can. As long as we're willing to work on it, maybe go to couples therapy, I know we can get through this." She smiled, and for the first time in a week, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. But as we left the coffee shop and headed back to our separate homes, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of this. Update number 4, the confrontation. I was at the grocery store when I saw him. Brandon, my supposed best friend who had slept with my wife and destroyed my marriage. I couldn't believe it. How could he show his face around here after everything he's done? How could he have the audacity to just go about his life like nothing's happened? I felt a surge of angerness and betrayal wash over me, and before I knew it, I was storming over to him, ready to confront him for everything. "What the heck do you think you're doing here?" I demanded to know. He turned around with a sheepish look on his face and said, I'm just shopping, but I came to apologize also," he said with his voice shaking. "I know I messed up, and I'm sorry for what I did." I couldn't believe it. He was apologized to me? After everything he's done, he had the nerve to stand in front of me and say he was sorry. "You're sorry?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do you have any idea what you did to me and my family? Do you have any idea how much pain you caused? How could you do this to me, Brandon? I trusted you. I considered you my best friend, and you go sleep with my wife behind my back?" He did hang his head low in shame, and he said, "I know, I'm sorry. I fell in love with her, Joey. I couldn't help it. I never meant to hurt you. It was just a moment of weakness, and I regret it every single day." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He said he fell in love with my wife and was expecting me to just forgive and forget, huh? You expect me to just forgive and move on? My voice filled with anger. After everything you've done, you think you can just waltz back into my life and expect everything to be hunky-dory. He looked at me, desperation in his eyes. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm hoping that you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I know I've made a huge mistake. I'm just willing to do whatever it takes, bro, to make things right. I couldn't take any more. The anger and the pain was too much to bear, and I let out a roar in front of everybody at the grocery store, and I just launched myself at him. I have no idea what I was thinking. I was ready to beat him to a pulp. We ended up rolling around on the ground, trading blows, and well, next thing I know, I'm at the police station. Part 5, a couple hours later. I was sitting in a holding cell, nursing a black eye and a bruised ego, when the door swung open and my wife waltzed in. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised to see her. She said she came to bail me out, and determined looked on her face. "And Brandon too," she said. I couldn't believe it. Why would you do that? I asked with my voice filling up with anger. He's the one who destroyed our marriage in the first place. He's the one who betrayed us, and yet you're bailing him out too. She sighed and took a seat next to me. Because I love you, Joey, she said, taking my hands in hers. And I know that you're hurting, but holding on to this anger and hatred isn't going to solve anything. It's only going to drive us further apart. I made a terrible mistake. I'm truly sorry for what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope that in time, you can find it in your heart to forgive both Brandon and me. I looked at her, my emotions in turmoil. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger and never forgive her or Brandon, but another part of me knew that she was right. Holding on to this grudge wasn't going to do anyone any good. It was only going to cause more pain and suffering for all of us. Fine, I said, letting out a sigh. I'll try to let go of this anger, but I'm telling you right now, it's not going to be easy. She gave me a small smile and said, I know it's not, but I'm here to support you, and I hope that one day you'll find it to forgive me, and maybe even Brandon too. He's made the terrible mistake as well, but he's truly sorry for what he's done, and you have to know it. I believe that he is truly remorseful and wants to make things right. I wasn't sure if I was ready to give Brandon just yet, but I knew that I needed to try to forgive him at least, for my own sake and for the sake of my marriage. It was going to be a long and difficult road, but I was willing to take the journey, if it meant saving my relationship with my wife. I took a deep breath and squeezed her hand and said, okay, I'll try. For you and for us, but it's going to take some time, you have to understand that. And she nodded and leaned her head on my shoulder and said, I understand. I'll be patient and wait for it as long as it takes. Maybe even counseling will get, because I love you, Joey, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. So I wrapped my arms around her and held her close, feeling a sense of hope and a renewal wash over me. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other and heal the wounds of the past. I know that we could try at least. Hey guys, Mr. Reddito here. The final conclusion of this story is upon us. Part 6. Guys, this update is actually crazy. It took a whole year before OP even mentioned anything, and then we find out this. It'd been a year since I'd forgiven Brandon and my wife for their affair. It was a difficult and painful process, but with time, I learned to let go of my anger and resentment. I had even managed to rebuild my friendship with Brandon, although it would never be the same as it was before, but I was at peace with that. I'd realized that forgiveness was not about forgetting or excusing what happened, but about letting go of the anger and moving on with my life. However, as much as I had tried to let go of my jealousy and anger, I couldn't shake the feeling that my wife was still attracted to Brandon. It was a constant nagging throughout the back of my mind, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, it seemed to consume me. One night, after a particularly heated argument about my suspicions, I stormed out of the house into a fit of rage. I wasn't thinking straight, and all I wanted to do was get away from the pain and hurt I see at home. I ended up getting into my car and driving off. I wasn't paying attention to the road or other cars around me, and that's when my life shattered. I heard the sound of metal crunching and the screeching of tires, and before I knew it, my car was flipped over. And over, and over. I felt a sharp pain in my head, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed surrounded by my wife and Brandon and nurses and doctors. They were both crying, and as I looked into their eyes, I knew something terrible happened. What is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What happened? As I lay in the bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't believe what transpired. I'd let my jealousy and anger consume me, and now I'm facing serious consequences for my actions. The police came into the room and told me that I hit another car head-on. The driver, well, they didn't make it, and to make matters worse, I was drinking a few hours before this, so I had alcohol all in my system at the time of the accident. I thought I was okay to drive. I was devastated. I'd never meant for anyone to get hurt, and the thought of being responsible for someone's death was unbearable. As the days passed and the reality of the situation sets in, I realized that I was facing a long prison sentence for this. My wife and Brandon visit me at the hospital, and I could see the pain and sadness in their eyes. "I'm so sorry," I said, as tears streamed down my face. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just angry and hurt, and I let my emotions win." My wife leaned over for a kiss on my forehead, possibly our last kiss ever. She said it's okay, her voice filled with love and forgiveness. "We all make mistakes," was what she said. "The important thing is we come out of this trying to be a better person." I just nodded, feeling some sense of shame and regret. I knew that I had a lot of work to do, but in terms of accepting responsibility for my actions and trying to make amends for the family that I harmed. As I was led away to start my prison sentence, I knew that it was going to be a long and difficult road. But I was determined to come out of this a better man, and to make amends for the mistakes of my past. I guess we'll find out in 8 years. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this story was absolutely heartbreaking, to the point of OP being driven actually insane, having his friend absolutely just crush him by cheating on his wife, then having his wife cheat on him, but somehow he finds a way to forgive her and put most of the blame on his best friend, not even looking at the fact that it takes two to tango. But hey, it all drives him to the end when he gets drunk, decides to get behind the car, and he unfortunately takes someone's life, somebody innocent, and this story was just all around sad. We learned at the end of the story, OP is going to be going away for 8 years. I can only hope once he gets out, he goes completely no contact with these two, and just does something better for his life. If you guys have any sort of advice that you would give OP, how we can go about these 8 years in prison he's about to look forward to. And keep in mind, this post is only a year old, so if all numbers are correct, he still has 7 years in prison. Drop your thoughts down below, guys. Thank you for tuning in on this story. Have a wonderful day, and remember, do not drink and drive.